Quackity quack. We are backity back with another Duck on a Rock Sports podcast. I'm Colin McDonough, flying solo today, and whether you're in a library or on the beach, it's time for some summer reading. This is our summer reading list episode. As we discussed way back when we started the podcast, myself and both of the Matts, we all work in education. Those schools that we work at pay the bills for us at Duck on a Rock. It is our day job. And since we're still on the duck hunt for a sponsor, it's our only paid job. But this episode, I want to delve into some nostalgic feelings of summer, reminisce a little bit about summer reading lists, maybe a trip to Pizza Hut if that was in the cards of many school systems, including Hamden Public Schools. But I'm going to suggest some summer reading books for you all from the sports section of your local bookstore. So without further ado, here's how we're going to start our book reports. So it's the dog days of August. It's also the dog days of baseball season. It's past the All-Star break. When we look at this, right, so obviously Duck on a Rock here in Connecticut, our northeast corridor of listeners and viewers, mainly in this New England tri-state area, the three local baseball teams, the Red Sox have had one of the best, if not the best month and a half in franchise history. They've catapulted up the standings, are now in a wild card spot, still in the division race. The Yankees, even with injuries, have remained the Yankees in a weak American League. The Yankees without Judge are still within striking distance of the Rays. The Red Sox are on their heels, but the Yankees would be the betting favorite to win the American League pennant, especially if Judge Stanton come back from injury. And the Mets are the Mets, so their season is kind of over, and we'll see how Juan Soto's next 12 or so years go in Queens. But our first book is about baseball. So the book is Skipper, Why Baseball Managers Matter, and Always Will, by Scott Miller. And this book, especially for a summer read, is outstanding. One of my favorite books that I've read in the last few years. So when you think about one of the more fascinating debates in sports, and especially baseball, really for 2 decades in the mainstream, but for 4 decades, if you get in the weeds, is the interaction of the baseball manager and general manager, front office versus on the field, analytics versus feel. This debate has leaked into the NBA. We talk about it all the time with the Celtics and Missoula Ball. But for this book, it follows a lot of great managers, from Dave Roberts in the midst of a Dodgers dynasty, Dusty Baker, Terry Francona, Kevin Cash, Aaron Boone, among others. So again, all of those managers have managed in a World Series. Roberts, Baker, Francona have won it. Obviously, Cash and Boone haven't yet. Either could win this year. It talks about family history, their playing career, but mainly, obviously, the managerial careers, the highs and lows, and how they have interacted with the front office, how they interact with players, and kind of the general strategy of that. It's a great read for a baseball fan. Any baseball coaches, or even just coaches in general, just to kind of see the kind of difference of time and generations. Obviously someone like Dusty Baker is a lot different than Kevin Cash, but all of these managers have had success, and it kind of just shows pretty much every organization is at least somewhere down this road that 20 years ago was Moneyball for the Oakland Athletics. The rest of the books will primarily focus more on basketball. Here's a book, Heartland by Keith O'Brien, A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and The Miracle of Larry Bird. This book is great for Celtics fans. It's great for college basketball fans. Again, I'm 36. Even if you are of a certain generation, this is a time before college basketball was what we know today. It was before March Madness blew up, and it does talk about how it did with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson in 1979. What I kind of liked most about it, though, wasn't just covering that, because it covered so much more. It covered the entire Indiana State coaching staff, the players, covered their NIT appearances before the undefeated season until the championship loss to Michigan State and Magic Johnson. So, obviously, if you happen to be an Indiana State Sycamores fan and you're listening to Duck on a Rock, I don't know what algorithm you have, but welcome. But even if you're not a Sycamores fan, it's just great. It goes through Larry Bird's childhood, obviously tough family situation, tragedy with his father, goes to Indiana University, doesn't make it much more than a month, plays in basically recreational business leagues, then gets to Indiana State, coaching staff, health situation with Bob King leads to a young coach with a different roster than even some of the previous years that Bird was there before his senior season, with NIT appearances. So just overall a great book, just untold stories, which is kind of a theme in some of these books, as well, as far as, if you're of a certain generation. When we look through this one, this is kind of older. This was written by Dan Shaughnessy during COVID. I just hadn't gotten around to it, so Wish It Lasted Forever, Life with the Larry Bird Celtics. Dan Shaughnessy, who covered the Celtics and then actually left the Celtics beat for the Red Sox beat at the Boston Globe during the 1986 season, what a lot of people consider the greatest Celtics team of all time, or NBA team of all time. It's an easy, good read if you're a Celtics fan, or just an NBA fan, and especially if you're a Celtics fan and want to forget the current state of affairs with the franchise, as Brad Stevens has done it again. In 2024, he created a super team with the Boston Celtics, and it led to an NBA championship. And in just 2 years later, Brad Stevens created another super team in the NBA. Unfortunately, it's now in Philadelphia. But that just shows how great a GM he is. So, again, this book, really interesting dynamics of Shaughnessy as kind of a go-getter journalist covering the beat, his back and forth with Bird, who, as if you read Heartland, Larry Bird barely talked to the press at Indiana State. So you kind of get a link to how he is in Boston. And then even, from Kevin McHale to Robert Parrish to, Red Auerbach making trades to Bill Walton to Cedric Maxwell. It's just a great book to kind of go through the 1980s NBA and 1980s Celtics. And then we're going to switch back to college basketball. This is a book by Jim Calhoun with Dom Amore, a former Hartford Courant colleague of ours. Hopefully Dom will maybe be on the pod someday, or at least sign this book. More Than a Game, How the UConn Basketball Dynasty Was Built on a Culture of Caring. Obviously Jim Calhoun shows the dichotomy of man. He's a very caring guy, and according to those who know him and have played for him, to people like us and most of us listeners and who don't know him personally, he is known as kind of a hothead, typical Boston Irish tough guy. And this book is a unique book. There's obviously been books by Jim Calhoun, books about Jim Calhoun, being UConn fans or UConn alums. Obviously, a lot of people know a lot of his stories, but this book, it focuses on a different kind of player or person in Calhoun's career. So it's unique storytelling from Damamori and Calhoun. It feels different because it is different. So it goes from, Rip Hamilton to a NASA scientist that was coached by Jim Calhoun at Dedham High School in Massachusetts. Obviously, we've mentioned on the podcast before, our dad, Jim McDonough of Celtics Chronicles, used to be Jim McDonough of Norwood High School basketball team, the Mustangs, against Jim Calhoun in the Bay State League in the 70s. But yeah, it goes from Hamilton to his high school days to Caron Butler and Kemba Walker to Dr. Keith Motley, former chancellor at UMass Boston, and our beloved Dorchester that was a part of Calhoun's Northeastern team. So it's a reflective side of Calhoun, long-winded in his storytelling at times, per usual. It's just a great read. It's kind of just classic Calhoun, and it's, again, some of these stories and some of these players, obviously you know a lot of them, but it's kind of tying together some loose ends and pieces, which are great. The next book is, again, similar theme, and if we're talking about Calhoun, now as a retired coach, even after St. Joseph, we're going back to the start for Calhoun in this book, and not just Calhoun, but others. This is a great one. Clayton Truder, Boston Ball, Rick Pitino, Jim Calhoun, Gary Williams, and the Forgotten Cradle of Basketball Coaches. So it really focuses on 1980s Boston. It really is a combination of the last two books in some ways, with Calhoun at Northeastern. Talks a little bit about the 1980s Celtics, talks a little bit about the city of Boston and what was going on post-1970s, that we've talked a little bit, and we'll try to get to a little bit in Celtics Chronicles too. But again, Rick Pitino was at Boston University, Gary Williams was at Boston College, Jim Calhoun was at Northeastern. So all of them won conference regular seasons or tournaments or multiple. When you look at Rick Pitino at BU, this is, again, you think about after BU, if you're, again, in my age bracket for a 5K race, you wouldn't remember him at BU, not even Providence. This is before the Knicks, before the Celtics, before Kentucky, Louisville, Iona, and St. John's. Pitino talks about his crazy practices. It's great because it goes into the arena situations at Northeastern, BC, and BU before all of them were playing at their current homes. It talks about Gary Williams and arguably the most successful time for BC basketball. Al Skinner might have something to say about that, and also maybe Luke Murray might have something to say about that. And it's just, even for Northeastern, it's their glory days. Reggie Lewis, obviously, but Calhoun winning conference titles. It's just kind of great to see the different conference realignment. Again, how different college basketball was as a whole. The Big East was different. So again, if you're someone who remembers 1980s college basketball, it might be great to relive it. And if you're someone who was not alive during 1980s college basketball or don't remember it, then maybe you'll get as much out of the book as I did. So a great read for that. So if you're listening, I just showed the covers of all the books. If you're watching, you saw them. So maybe if you're, judging books by their cover, then you might like some of them. There's one book that Matt McDonough has, the hard copy of Ian O'Connor, Dan Hurley, Never Stop. When you think of Dan Hurley and a book, you would probably think of it as intense, and It is. So Never Stop Life, Leadership, and What It Takes to Be Great. It basically talks about Hurley's entire life. A lot of it, again, some of it we don't remember him playing for Seton Hall in the 90s. I mean, I read The Miracle of St. Anthony about his father, but it's just great to see his family history on the pages. Talks about his father, mother, extended family. Talks in depth at the beginning, especially about him almost leaving for the Lakers job and the decision process with his family, Andrea and his kids. Sounded like he was almost going to go to the Lakers from UConn after the 2024 national championship. Talks a lot about obviously Jersey City and his New Jersey roots, and goes through his coaching career from high school to Wagner to Rhode Island to UConn, and getting to Storrs and winning back-to-back national championships in 2023 and 2024. And also doesn't cover the 2026 season, but talks about 2025 as well. But even the UConn stuff obviously is new, and most of us have been living above a rock, hopefully being Ducks on one the last few years, so we know the UConn side of things. But even his mental health struggles as a player and a coach, a player at Seton Hall, while his brother's starring at Duke, eventually going to NBA, getting into an accident, his coaching career, them coaching together. So kind of just a really cool read. It probably could have been shorter. Maybe I was, as a reader, not as focused that week when I read it. It sometimes felt repetitive. It was a little stream of consciousness, Dan Hurley, so I guess it is par for the course. But sometimes if you're being critical of it, you'd say it doesn't always seem genuine. He talks about, and the same words would probably be said about me or any of us, whether it be recording a podcast or writing our own book about ourselves. But like, it talks about how he was so nervous before the exhibition game, I think at Mohegan against URI, more nervous than he had been against Purdue in the national championship. Like, is that Hurley being the most intense coach ever, or is it almost a caricature of himself? I don't know. I don't know the guy, but again, if you're a diehard UConn fan, a diehard Hurley fan, you will love the book, because it is classic, intense Dan Hurley. And if you are a UConn hater or don't like Hurley or a skeptic, then some parts you may say are a waste. So kind of no surprise there with the critiques of the book. Again, none of these authors paid us to do this or are advertising their books on Duck on a Rock. This was just a summer reading episode. Hopefully, maybe we get some of these authors on a podcast to talk about their books amongst other sports topics. There are 2 books out now. Like I said, Don Amore, a former colleague at the Hartford Courant. Dave Borges, a former colleague when Matt and I were interns at the New Haven Register. He has 2 books out now that are on my list to get to. So the summer reading list, I've got a couple weeks left of it, but may not finish it. Hurley's Heroes and the UConn Basketball Illustrated Timeline, both I want to check out. And then the other one that Amazon is sending late, is this one will be different, by J.C. Bradbury, about why taxpayer-funded stadiums don't provide the economic benefits that they usually say they will. So I did quick reviews from the books I read. I didn't want to go too in-depth for a multitude of reasons. One, I don't want to spoil the book for anyone, any books for anyone if they plan on reading them. 2, this podcast is almost 20 minutes as is, and it's about books, so we'll see our metrics on listening. And 3, I haven't done a book report in a long time, so my notes may not have been as sharp as needed to give a full either scathing review or a comprehensive, good review for all these books, but I recommend all of them. And then lastly, a non-sports shout out to some of my favorite books. Colin Woodard, historian from Maine, American Nations, American Character Union, and his most recent book, Nations Apart. Again, just for any people who like history, social studies, or political current events, those have been read and I recommend reading them. So again, this episode, our summer reading list from Door, Duck on a Rock. And if you are looking for more Duck on a Rock updates, episodes, those will be to come. We are in the lab currently working on some things, so hopefully we have more episodes and news to share with you shortly. Until then, again, this is a summer reading list episode, so I'll say to everyone, have a good summer, and thank you for being a part of our flock.